So, we are busy talking about what viruses do. So, the virus here basically has that little bit of DNA or RNA in it. The protein capsid, protein coat, exists to protect the DNA or RNA. The virus comes up to a cell, a bacteria, or another form of cell. It attaches and then squirts the RNA or DNA into the cell in order to destroy it. Now, the easiest way to study this interaction is when we look at something called a bacteriophage. A bacteriophage is a kind of is basically a kind of virus that attacks bacteria. That it wants to destroy bacteria to reproduce itself. Now, in terms of the way that works, there's two different sort of ways the cycle can go. One way the cycle can go is called a lytic or a lytic bacteriophage infection. And the reason I've got a raging barbarian on there is because a raging barbarian is what a lytic infection is. Basically, the virus comes along, attaches to the bacteria. The DNA or RNA goes through the protein coat into the bacteria. Within the bacteria, it grafts itself onto the DNA itself of the bacteria, or if it is an RNA, a piece of RNA instead, that RNA begins working within the ribosomes to create new pieces of uh, the protein coat of which the viruses are assembled, also goes to producing new pieces of RNA. So the DNA or the RNA comes into the system and basically hijacks the bacteria's normal functions. So the bacteria instead makes the copy of the genetic information within the virus and protein coats for the virus. Those are assembled together within the bacteria. Basically speaking, these viral genes, they get transcribed into the cell. The bacterium makes the viral proteins and nucleic acid. The proteins and nucleic acids assemble together into new viruses. And once there are enough new viruses inside of it, it literally lyses or pops the exterior of the bacteria, and all these viruses come spewing out to go infect other bacteria. It's a frontal assault that comes in, takes over the headquarters, and uses the factory of the bacteria itself in order to produce virus after virus after virus after virus until there are enough that it explodes, and those viruses go and they attack other bacteria. That's the lytic cycle. Now, the other way that this gets done is the lysogenic cycle. The lysogenic cycle is like the secret agent version. A lysogenic cycle, the infection gets copied into the DNA. So what happens is that the DNA of the virus is copied into the DNA of the bacteria. As the bacteria, being a living organism, reproduces all of its offspring, that is to say, all of the bacteria that come into being out of binary fission because of that bacteria dividing, and then the daughter cells dividing and dividing and dividing and dividing. All of those bacteria all carry the genetic information for this virus within the bacteria, and they sit dormant as the bacteria reproduces to fill as much of the environment as it can. And then at some trigger point, depending on the particular virus, depending upon the situation, a trigger point is reached, and suddenly all of these chunks of viral DNA in all of these bacteria that are descended from the bacteria that was first infected slip back into the lytic infection cycle. So they go, this lysogenic one, basically it gets into the DNA, gets reproduced into a bunch of bacteria, and then all of those bacteria go off at the same time, producing viruses and causing an overwhelming tsunami of infection by the viruses.